Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer video. And today, we're going to be talking about the best green creatures in Pioneer as it currently stands. So this list is a little bit subjective for the most part. You know, obviously, I'm picking cards that are pretty much actively seeing play in the Pioneer format. You know, there's no statistics that's saying, oh, this card has top-aided this many or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It is my opinion, so if your opinion is different than mine, definitely let me know in the comment section below. But I can tell you that the cards that are on this list are definitely some of the best green creatures in Pioneer. And before we hop into it here, I want to mention this is any green creature, well, with green in its color identity. So there's going to be some cards that are multicolor, but they do have green in their identity. Just wanted to be clear on that. And before we hop into the list, which I ended up picking 10 cards for this list, but we're going to talk about two that are honorable mentions that I really wanted to talk about just in general. And those two are Nissa Resurgent Animist and Sentinel of the Nameless City. So Nissa obviously is the engine in the like 4-5 color deck that plays like all the different evolving wilds, and you bring them back. You know, obviously make mana from the landfall trigger, and you do all these crazy things. It's definitely the engine for that deck. The only reason I didn't put it on the list is just because that deck is pretty solid. You do see it on Arena a lot. I feel like it's had a hard time truly taking off, and especially, you know, just becoming one of the better decks in Pioneer. The deck itself is not bad, and it's getting pieces every single set that comes out, it seems like. You know, obviously, like, they just got Lumra Bellower of the Woods recently, so we'll kind of see what happens with this deck moving forward, but I think it has potential, and that's why I wanted to include this on the honorable mentions. And then Sentinel of the Nameless City is just a really, really good card in general. You get a lot of value from the map tokens. It sees a lot of play in Merfolk decks, as well as some Golgari midrange decks. They like to play it as a finisher. It's just a good card in general, and I wanted to include it on here just because it is seeing play in the Pioneer format. So that's why it's on the honorable mentions. Okay, let's hop into the actual list here. So number 10, and this is going to be a little bit of a, I want to say a controversial pick here, but not including a card like this on this list just doesn't seem right. And that card is Ghalta Stampede Tyrant. So it's only really seeing play in one active deck, and that's Stampede Dinosaurs. Huge shout out to Arfi Games. He specializes in this deck, so you definitely should check out his channel. It's Arfi, A-R-F-I Games on YouTube here. But Ghalta Stampede Tyrant, I mean, it's a 12/12 for 8 with trample. When it enters, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. I mean, that's such an incredible effect, and especially in the Stampede Dinosaur list where you put in a bunch of Register Alphas and Polani's Hatchers, your entire battlefield has haste, and you just do a one-shot swing. It's pretty insane if you haven't actually seen the deck in action. It's really, really cool. But a card like this, I feel like, has a lot of potential because, you know, even like, for instance, Reanimator decks are starting to come back a little bit. Maybe it's a deck, you know, maybe this is a card that Reanimator maybe would play at least just like a one-of spicy copy because you play like Lively Dirge with it, where you could search for a creature, or search for a card, put it in your graveyard, so you can do this, and then you play it, and the Atraxas that are stuck in your hand or something like that, you can just cheat into play with Ghalta. I don't know. I think this card has a lot of potential. It's only seeing play in one deck, but I would expect this card to see some play moving forward, and that's why I've got it as number 10 on the list here. Sorry, number 9, I have Burning Tree Emissary. Burning Tree Emissary is a fantastic card, especially in a Tarka Red and Mono Red Devotion decks. When it enters, make red-green, so you can chain a couple of them. You get all your red and or green Devotion, and then you take advantage with Nykthos, for instance, because guess what? Nykthos is 2 mana to activate, so you can just go like, for instance, Burning Tree, and then tap your Nykthos, and boom, just make a whole bunch of mana. Although it's not seeing a lot of play currently in the mono-green Devotion list, it does see a lot of play in decks like a Tarka Red and Mono Red Devotion. I wouldn't be surprised if this card does kind of come back to a certain extent to Mono Green Devotion. I know before the deck got like really, really big, it was more of like a Vivian Arcbow Ranger style Mono Green Devotion, and they play like this, and they play like J-Light Ranger and things like that. I think there's a chance that it does come back into the list, but as of right now, it's not seeing play, but it's still one of the best green creatures in the entire format, and that's why it's at number 9. Alrighty, number 8, I have Old Growth Troll. This card is super good in the mono green devotion list. Just obviously you get the 4/4 trampler, the 3 green pips, which is really important. But the biggest reason why this card is so good is that when it dies, you can essentially, it's like an Utopia Sprawl in a way, because you enchant a forest and it taps for 2 green, and then if you really want to, you can sacrifice it and make another troll, which is it's just a lot of value in one card. See, and the other tricky part with this card is you don't care if it dies, because if you kill this, if your opponent's playing mono green devotion and you take it out, then it just ramps your opponent more. So it's like this weird thing where it's like, okay, I need to get through with my creatures, but I don't want them to be ramped. So it's like, it's a really weird medium for the most part with Old Growth Troll. It's like, you don't want to take it out, but you don't want it to just sit there because it's a 4/4 trampler and it will just take you out of the game. So it's kind of like a weird medium with this card. And that's why cards like Obliterating Bolt were so popular for so long, just because it takes out the Old Growth Troll by exiling it, which is really, really important with Old Growth Troll. So it's a really, really good card. Mono Green Devotion is usually a 4 of in that deck, and it's just fantastic. It's a great card. So that's why it's number 8 here on the list. All right, number 7. I have Glade Cover Scout. 1/1 for 1 with Hexproof. Probably the most simple design card on the entire list. And you want to know what? It only sees play in one deck, which is why I'm hurting it a little bit. It just sees play in Bogles or Hexproof, if that's what you like to call it. It's the best 1-drop in the entire deck just because it has Hexproof. So then you start throwing all of your Ethereal Armors and all that glitters and everything on there, and it gets way too big, way too quick. If you're playing against a Bogles deck and they go turn 1 Glade Cover Scout, like, you better hope that their hand wasn't that good and they kind of compensated for having the turn 1 Glade Cover Scout, because things can get out of hand really, really, really quick. So, Glade Cover Scout, I've got it at number 7 here on the list. All right, number 6, I have Nive Mizit Reborn. It is not just a green card, it is a Wooburg card. And this card is the heart and soul of the 5-color Nive mid-range deck, because obviously you get it from Nive. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This card is really, really good. It's a fantastic engine for the 5-color Niv deck, because, you know, it's a mid-range deck at heart, so it plays a lot of good removal, and then you run out of cards, and then you play the Niv Mizzet, and you just completely refill. It's a fantastic card. I love Niv Mizzet Reborn. I think the design is fantastic. It's a powerful card, and it's also a green card, so that's why it is number 6 here on the list. The only reason I really put it number 6 and not higher is just because it's only really sees play in this one deck, and the top 5 cards here are very, very strong too. So this was a very competitive list here, especially at the top. Sorry, number 5, we're in the top 5 here. So number 5, I have Yuga, Eater of All. I already have it above Niv Mizzet because Yuga is super duper good in the Jund and Golgari Sacrifice decks. Obviously because it does the infinite combo with Cauldron Familiar. It's just fantastic. And you want to know what? Even if, hypothetically, even if you don't have the combo, it also is just a 6/6 for 5, and it just gets even bigger, which is really, really cool. The Ward Sacrifice of Food is also really tricky, because decks that don't play a lot of creatures are going to struggle to take out Yuga. Like, they can't even really do it at all. If your opponent's not playing creatures, the Ward Sacrifice of Food, they can't pay it. They can't pay the cost unless they do something really, really weird or somehow can make food, which is not a really common thing, especially if you're not playing like the Golgari Sacrifice decks or anything like that. So Yuga is a fantastic card. It's also the newest card on this entire video here, but it's definitely very, very good, and I expect it to get even better moving forward as Wizards of the Coast makes more cards, it seems like, that are just really, really good for the Sacrifice decks. So Yuga is number 5 on the list. All right, number 4, I have Gigantha. So Gigantha is theoretically the most played card on this entire video. Like, obviously, look at that. Featured in Mono Red Aggro, Jund Sack, Golgari Sack, Rakdos Fling, Rakdos Tree, Boros Convoke, Izzet Soul, and Rakdos Transmog, just to name some of the decks that this card actually sees playing. But the one thing I take points away from it for is it's as a companion. You don't play it because it's like a companion that's like synergizes with the entire deck or anything like that, or the deck needs Gigantha to work, or it doesn't even see play at all in the main board. The reason this card is good is because it's basically free. There's a ton of different decks in the format that you can just build and then be like, oh, wait, I get to play Gigantha. I mean, heck, you know, with my deck techs I do on the channel here all the time, That's the case a lot of time. I'll build the deck and then realize, oh, hey, I can put Giganta in, is the companion, and I'll put it in as the companion slot. So Giganta does lose points a little bit just because there's nothing ever featured around it, but it's funny. It's an old saying. If ever you play Giganta in your deck and then you say, man, I forgot to reveal Giganta, but I never going to cast it. You're going to cast it your next game like 100% of the time, which could be a good or bad thing depending on how you look at it. So Giganta's number 4. I would say it's probably the strongest fair companion, but it's mostly just because the companion cost to be able to play it is very, very small. So Giganta, number 4 on the list. All right, we're in top 3 territory now. So number 3, I have Atraxa Grand Unifier. I gave a little bit of a hint at the beginning of the video there. I said that with Atraxa, but it has greed in its color identity, so it made the list. This card is arguably not only for Pioneer, but it's one of the best, if not the best, reanimation target in the entire game because it doesn't have the shuffle effect to it, so you don't have to have the instant speed. This card is so good. 7/7 for 7, flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you just get to play this and you get to refill your entire hand, kind of similar to Nive Mizit in a way. But the card is just so good. Like even just being able to just draw a whole bunch of cards. It also has Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink. So you can just take over the game because of the Lifelink. It's obviously great at blocking because it has the Vigilance and the Lifelink. So it's hard to get like a full swing on it. It's obviously it's really good. It's featured in Rakdos Transmog, Jeskai Creativity, and Mardu Reanimator. It's obviously pretty much the best card in all of those decks. I know Rakdos Transmog also does play Valgavoth, but Atraxa's really the one that you want to be scared of. This card is absolutely incredible. If your opponent's cheating this into play, especially like even a little bit ahead of schedule, you got to have an answer to be able to take this out. If you don't have like a Pick Your Poison or, our Doomblade effect, like you're going to lose to Atraxa. Atraxa is extremely strong. I expect it to be a really, really big player moving forward in Pioneer, and that's why I've got it at number 3. Sorry, number 2, and again, I had the mixture, like obviously Atraxa is probably the strongest raw power in this video, but I had to include a card that is green. It is green at its heart, but is really, really strong and sees a lot of play, and that card is Cavalier Thorns. I would say the heart of Mono Green Devotion. This card is what makes the deck work. 5/6 for 5 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put a land card from among them out of the battlefield in the rest of your graveyard, and then when it dies, you can exile it, and if you do, put another target card from your graveyard on top of your library. Cavalier Thorns is the menace in Mono Green Devotion. It's what makes the deck work. It's a 5-drop. It's got the 3 green pips on there. You can play this on turn 3 pretty consistently. You put a Nykthos in play. You fill up your graveyard. So, for instance, cards like Storm the Festival go into the graveyard, so you can flash it back on your next turn. If you're playing this in a deck that happens to have a little bit more graveyard synergy, that's also something that could happen. Cavalier Thorns is just really, really good. Shout out. I also loved it when Uro was legal in the format. I would do this. I play this with Uro, and it was absolutely crazy. So, shout out to Uro, I suppose. But it only sees playing Mono Green Devotion. That doesn't mean it's a bad card, though. It just means that, that's the one deck that takes advantage of it. You play a bunch of green big fatties, and that's the deck to do it. But I would say it is the most important green creature in the deck. I would say it's probably like the most important creature in the deck. The turn 3 Cavalier Thorns, especially if you're playing aggro, is just, it feels so bad. It's a 5/6 with reach, and then if you do happen to be able to like 2 for 1 and take it out, then they just get to, do a reclaim, and it's just absolutely disgusting. So Cavalier Thorns is number 2 on the list because it is a very, very good green card. Okay. So number 1 on the list, I think a lot of people know the card I'm going to pick on this, or pick for the number 1 slot here. I think it's relatively obvious, but it might come to, be a little bit of a surprise to some people. And that card is Llanowar Elves and Elish Mystic. Obviously, it's probably the lowest power level as, other than like Glade Cover Scout on this list, but Llanowar Elves and Elish Mystic are so important to the Pioneer format. So, obviously, featured in Mono Green Aggro, Mono Green Devotion, Green White Angels, Elves, Green White Company, Gruul Dinosaurs, and more decks. Really, any deck that's a green deck that really wants a 1-drop, they're going to play this. Obviously, some mid-range decks don't play it, but if you're like an aggro deck, you're going to want to play this if you're in green. If you're a ramp deck, you're definitely going to want this, especially if you're in green. If you're not playing green ramp, something's up. But anyways, Land Rose and Elish Mystic are so critical to the format. Obviously, they're better or worse depending on what the metagame looks like, but they're so important. I mean, I remember for a while that people were saying like, hey, we need to get rid of one of these just because Mono Green Devotion is just so good. But Land Rose and Elish Mystic are extremely important in the Pioneer format, especially in a format without Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch and Ignoble Hierarch. This is the best it gets for your one-drop mana dorks, and they're both fantastic. I expect them to continue seeing even more play as the format goes on, just because, hey, until they really put any of those really, really good mana dorks in the format, these are going to be the best ones, and I don't see them doing that for quite some time here. So, Land Dwarves and Elish Mystic, the best green creatures in the entire Pioneer metagame. They are absolutely fantastic. Land Elves and Elish Mystic, classic cards, and they will continue to see play as time goes on. So, that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Serwanoki, and Night Red 3, our new channel member. If you're interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 a month. You get access to our exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.